Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes I don't know why anybody would want to watch Days of Our Lives. I mean, just watch South African politics. That's far more entertaining and far more action-packed. But before we get on to the main video of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It really does help. And if you'd like to support the work that I do here, welcome to buy me a coffee. Anyway, let's get straight on to the videos. Before we do, let's actually look at what's happening at the moment in terms of the ANC. And that is, it's holding its 10th Provincial Conference in the Northern Cape. And very interestingly enough, the ANC's Treasurer General Gwen had some very interesting comments to make. And she said that those who are seeking to reverse the Expropriation Act and the BBBEE laws were what she classed as unconstitutional. Because according to her, those very things are actually embedded in the Constitution itself, and trying to reverse those acts would undermine the Constitution. So according to her, if you look at the actual ANC, which had the largest majority in Parliament, I say majority, they don't have a majority, they got the largest delegation at 40%, she said that the ANC had gone down in numbers, but you couldn't then automatically apply the logic that the DA was the next logical conclusion, because their support remained at around 20%, and therefore the DA had not actually grown. According to her, that should the ANC stay on target, the ANC could look to reverse its losses come the next by-elections. You can let me know what you think in the comment section below. But actually, if I look at this objectively, all the independent metrics at the moment with all of the polling data shows me that the voters don't actually agree with what this ANC minister says. The voters are showing that many of these populist type policies are actually leading to voter apathy in the ANC. Why, you might ask? Because BEE never created any jobs ever. It disincentivizes many individuals from investing in South Africa and bringing foreign capital here. And it also disincentivizes individuals in the country from starting up their own businesses. We can obviously move on to the budget debacle. I say budget debacle because the entire budget process is now in the Western Cape High Court, specifically around the VAT increase. Now, the DA did make it very clear that should the budget be passed, they would take the budget to court, and effectively they would argue to get the VAT increase scrapped. Now, let's look at how they intend to get it scrapped. First of all, their argument remains around the lawfulness of the process used to adopt the budget framework. According to them, the budget went before the National Council of Provinces. The provinces said that it had to go back to the relevant portfolios to be redrafted, and that wasn't done, which means that procedurally the process to adopt the budget wasn't followed. Now, the ANC's argument is that the process to be followed isn't actually a parliamentary process. It's a power that rests solely in the finance minister and obviously in Treasury. According to him, he is at liberty to create these laws should he so wish. Now, Action SA voted for the budgetary framework on the basis that they would basically have the VAT increase reviewed within 30 days to find money from other avenues. And in doing that, they could stop the VAT increase from occurring. And this apparently is what Gwen Ngwenya had promised Herman Mashama. So the challenge effectively rests on two different points of dispute. The first is the parliamentary process, if it's Parliament's authority to grant the budget to the VAT increase, which according to the DA remains the sole jurisdiction of Parliament in line with the Constitution, or is it the minister who gets to do it just on a whim based on his own personal opinion? Now, interestingly enough, one of the judges reviewing the cases did actually comment, a passing comment if you will, that it would appear to him that Gwen Ngwenya had a vague notion of no taxation without representation. In other words, that the ANC could pass budgets to tax citizens regardless of what the parties who are represented in Parliament think. Now, remember that the parties in Parliament are elected by the public, and therefore they're effectively meant to be doing the will of the public. And according to this judge, the ANC doesn't care what the general electorate seems to think, and that's actually kind of true. Now, the EFF co-joined itself as the second party to the application, and the EFF accused Gwen Ngwenya of deception when it told the Action SA that effectively they could review the budgetary process. They said you never intended to review the budget in order to remove VAT. You knew it was always going to be a certainty. In fact, you didn't even have the ability to review it in order to basically withdraw it. So they said you lied. You lied to Action SA in order to get them to vote your way. And yet again, this is your daily reminder. If you voted for Action SA, you're an idiot, because these guys are not a serious party. Now, interestingly enough, the EFF did go further to say that should Gwen Ngwenya actually want to find alternative means to tax the population in order to finance the missing gap in funds that the Treasury needs, they could have proposed are you waiting for it? An apartheid tax. Yes, you heard me right. Yet again, it's apartheid's fault. Yeah, why not? I mean, everything was apartheid's fault. Anyway, according to the Superior Logic Party, a tax increase could be levied on basically trusts and parties that inherited apartheid wealth through property portfolios and various other things. They cite trusts and luxury properties, whatever those may be, as being things that could have been used by these apartheid beneficiaries to leverage loans and enrich themselves. And those things could be subjected to a wealth tax. You could also increase corporation tax from 27 to 29% because, I quote, companies are making money. You can't say they're not making money. They're making money, so we must tax them. That's exactly what they said. And so it's very curious when you look at this, because you have to ask yourself questions such as, how would you know what's an apartheid beneficiary wealth trust of some variety, and what do you class as a luxury property? I mean, we've actually seen in some legislation that the ANC adopts that it considers people that are wealthy to be like, I got like 2 million rand, so I must be loaded. The problem is when you take that money to like a serious country, I don't know, United States, it's less than 100,000 US dollars. Like, what are you going to buy that? Like a car. And so those countries will look at our definitions of wealth and luxury properties, and they'd be like, dude, that's like a 2-bedroom apartment in the middle of London. That's in the most rundown neighborhood ever. You see, it's easy to make these stupid claims when they sound intelligible to people that are uneducated and live in poverty. But when you actually look at it and you start saying, oh, wealth tax, define a wealth tax. And how many people actually fall in those categories? And those individuals that do fall in those categories, how many of them would just take their money and run? Anyway, superior logic for you, folks. Moving on to another issue, and this is the most interesting issue that I've been following, and that is, at the weekend, Paul Mashatile was canvassing. He was canvassing for support to become president of the ANC after Ramaphosa leaves office. And according to him, he was shot at. So let's actually rewind a little bit. Let's actually remind ourselves what kind of president Paul Mashatile would be. And this comes following the allegation that when canvassing in Waterfall, in a Equestrian estate, he left the actual estate, Ward 132, and effectively drove down the road on the opposite side of the road in order to avoid traffic, thus creating a hazard to oncoming traffic and also in violation of the road laws. In other words, something that we've seen with Paul Mashatile's motorcades quite a lot. When they assault individuals, don't follow the road laws, it's always rules for me, but not for thee. It appears like he's very much a rogue politician and that he'll just do whatever makes sense for him. Who cares about the rules? In any case, Paul says that he's currently not canvassing to become the president of the ANC, even though he is canvassing to become the leader of the ANC. And you may say to yourself, well, that sounds stupid. And that's because it does. Effectively, that the leadership contest hasn't yet started, so Paul can't effectively canvass, but he's trying to get an early start. And so he's saying, in his words, all the branches now know me. He wants to go to the branches and ingratiate themselves with them. He wants to go there and make sure they know who he is. And he feels that by doing that, he would effectively be able to get himself a head start on the ANC conference 2027. Where the new leader would be elected. And according to him, if you were in the ANC and you didn't have the ambition to become the president, then what the hell were you doing there? They said it's not unrealistic that he would be doing that. But he now claims that when driving around doing this canvassing, this driving between branches, that his motorcade was shot at and his life was put into danger. And very interestingly, the same politician from the first clip, remember the lady on the BE clip? Yeah, the Secretary Treasurer General basically said that this is hogwash. He said, there is a focus on rebuilding the ANC, but the ANC got like 40% of the election. I mean, why would anybody shoot at a 40% deputy president party leader? She said when the ANC had 70%, they weren't getting shot at. So like, why would they get shot at now at 40%? And there is now an allegation that Paul is trying to effectively frame himself as being subjected to fear and intimidation by those who may run against him. And so he's kind of a martyr for the party because he's such a good candidate that his opponents are actually trying to threaten his life and shoot at him. And it's very curious because I myself would ask the first question, and that is, how do you know you were shot at? I mean, were there bullet holes in the car? Were there case shells somewhere? Like, what's going on here? Like, what makes you think that it was a shot? Did you just hear some loud pangs in the sky? Could have been a vehicle backfiring. Hell, it could have been two people shooting at each other down the road. I mean, you know, areas that he might travel in. Who knows? Could happen. How does he know specifically that he was shot at? And this is actually getting a lot of people to ask that very same question, because the independent evidence of Paul being shot at is very slim. It's just basically his allegation and that of his motorcade. And this has led people, even in the ANC itself, to say, well, the assassination attempt allegation is just complete hogwash. So much so that the president himself actually hasn't commented on it yet. He hasn't said, well, the executives' lives are in danger. There are many parties in the ANC itself that are basically classing this as a fake event. It's a faked event in order to create outrage centered around the deputy president. It's kind of shameless, but highly entertaining. So the question is, was the actual assassination attempt real or staged or just made up in Paul's head? And the answer is we don't know. But interestingly enough, what we do know is that the police commissioner has confirmed the shooting incident. And again, we don't know on the basis of what. Is this just because Paul said to you, I got shot at, and he's like, yep, definitely happened. Yep, definitely happened. But it's very curious, as I said, presidency itself hasn't actually made any comments about this. What they have done is they've increased the security details around President Ramaphosa and Deputy President Paul Mashatile, because nobody would want these individuals to be shot at or assassinated. It's kind of curious, though. Was he really shot at? And if so, why? There's no real reason to shoot at the deputy president, but there appears to be every reason for him himself to claim that he was shot at. The reality is that Paul Mashatile, as an actual politician, has been largely ineffective. He actually hasn't done anything that would put him on the radar of anyone. He leads up the dispute resolution service of the GNU, and, well, whether or not you could class that as being successful remains an issue in itself. But what he has done is completely attempted at numerous stages to undermine the GNU. And largely, he's attempted to undermine Cyril Ramaphosa at every possible opportunity. And this has meant that, to be frank, if you actually look at his deliverables independent of that, not really a lot that you can say that he's done. You then have to ask yourself a simple question: what does the guy actually stand for? And the answer is that, well, no one knows. He pretty much stands for anything that he thinks might get him into power. He appears to be, by all intents and purposes, a man driven by the desire to become leader of the country and the power that that wields. Nothing more. And those individuals can be rather dangerous. As was once said by the great man Plato, he who does not desire power is fit to hold it. The reverse is also true. He who desires power is not fit to hold it. And this could very easily be applied to Paul Mashatile, but that's just my opinion. Please do let me know what you think in the comment section below. Well, the long video, but two really interesting topics to discuss today. Let me know what you think. Until tomorrow, bye.